welcome Bill Prenatt.
Thanks, Claudia. Thank you. Can you easily recall that there were times in your life where things just seemed like they were spinning out of control? Can you all kind of easily, I want to make sure I connect with you on that, right? I mean, some of you may be in that situation today, right, where things are just kind of crazy. So that's what this presentation is all about. It has incredibly special meaning for me, and I'll explain that to you in a minute. But 35 years ago, I got introduced to this tool, and I've been practicing it ever since. So I can count at least 7 times during my life where this tool saved my life because of the kinds of things that happen to us that are very difficult to overcome. My son was killed in an auto accident. I was in a divorce. My daughter had a tubular pregnancy. I had a job that I thought was my dream job, and that didn't work out. So, I'm sure you all have your own list of things, but I've never really shared this before in a group. I've shared it in one-on-one coaching, but I thought it was time to, to share this generally speaking. When I'm done, I'm going to ask you if you have some additions to my presentation that you've experienced. I'd like to hear those from you, if you're comfortable, sharing that with the group. So this isn't just about my singular experience. Thank you. Sorry about that. You guys familiar with a Weeble Wobble? Huh? Right? Did you have one when you were kids? Yeah. So that's for those of you who weren't. This had a little sand in the bottom of it, and it would, if you hit it, it would kind of, it would go bounce back and forth. That's a Weeble Wobble. So this is what kind of reminds me of what happens to us. We're kind of going along, and all of a sudden we get smacked right in the face, right? Something right out of the blue we hadn't thought about, and what do? Well, typically what happens is we kind of freak out, first of all. We get scared. We have a lot of fear. There's a lot of things going on in our lives. And what I found out in practicing this information that was given to me 35 years ago from a minister was that they're very similar. Even though they appear like they're very different, there are some things that are very similar and can be managed. And that's really what I want to share with you today is, what is that tool and how can you use it so that you don't have to be randomly out of control? So we typically, when we get into this situation, we deal with this in a very haphazard way. Each one of them's got their own unique characteristics. What we don't really realize is that everybody else is going through the same kinds of problems, right? So we're not alone, but we tend to think of, how awful this is. The other thing is, though, it's very predictable. And this is what most people don't realize is this process that we go through when we get smacked in the face is predictable and can be managed. And I want to share with you how I've been able to do that as a result of this tool. So when I was in California, this was described to me as a death spiral. So if you see this downward staircase, this should look very familiar to you. First, we're shocked. We go through disbelief, denial, anger, negotiation, withdrawal, and we resist all of these things that are going on. If you've been through anything very significant, you're going, yeah, I recognize that. What we don't really realize, though, is that resistance is step one, and what we don't know what to do is how to get out of it. And there are people who never do get out of it. You may have friends or family who are still stuck in some sort of a cycle that they've never been able to break out of. So step one is to understand everybody else is doing it. It happens. It's manageable. So the real key to this is you have to get back to take charge. So that happens in these steps. First of all, we begin to accept what's going on. That's critical. Then we become more optimistic about, I can do this. I can get through it. And then we decide that we actually need to improve something. Again, what makes this really interesting to me is it's all predictable. We think it's not, but it really is. So as soon as you begin to, feel like you can take charge, you in fact can control how long you're going to have to deal with this situation. What I tell people is, my experience says, you're not going to stop feeling this way. What you can do is shorten the amount of time that you feel this way, right? So it doesn't have to ruin your life. It doesn't have to be something that's going to go on forever and ever. And so I just encourage people, let it go. Go ahead. I mean, work through that process and get to take charge. Just this past week, I was on vacation with a guy who brought this to an interesting light to me. He said, what he does is he just says, so what's next? Just a simple, what's next? And I thought, wow, that was really so profound. Because we're stuck and we can't think of a what's next. So if you can start thinking about, well, what's next? What am I going to do next? I think it takes you to take charge. So I think you can all identify with this. It's very simple. But I'd like you to work on this as a result of this today, because I know that it will make a difference in your life like it has in mine. So is there anyone who would like to share? You see now what the tool is. Is there anyone that wants to share what you've learned in your process that might apply, that might help the group? Judy?
I was just thinking, on Friday, I was doing a talk downtown, and I thought I was supposed to start at 12:40, and I was actually supposed to start at 12:05. So I'm driving around the building, and the woman's like, "Where are you? You're on in 5 minutes." So, and it's this huge building. So I was in shock, denial. I was like shaking and everything. And this guy on the elevator said, "You know what? I do 25 or more talks a year." He said, "When this happens, use it and put the energy into your talk." It totally shifted.
Yeah.
Just in the ride up the elevator, I was completely reversed because I was so stuck in that downward spiral. I didn't even feel like I could function. So I don't know if that's what you're saying.
Yeah.
I mean, it was almost like a given an experience to me, but it taught me I didn't even see that option when I was in my own spiral. So it was, I think it fits with what you're saying.
Very much so. Yeah. And I want to be sure that we share the microphone. Dale.
Yeah, Bill, I take no pride in this, but my first adventure into college, I played around a little too much and flunked out. And
No.
Honest to God truth. And my
Oh, no.
yeah, oh yeah. And my dad said, "Well, that's a temporary setback. What are you going to do next?"
Wow.
And
What a great
powerful
gift
lesson.
that is.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is so. Yeah. Anyone else have anything that you're, yeah, over here.
Bill, you actually shared this tool with me probably 3 years ago. My mom had passed away, and I was kind of stuck at the bottom and really upset about it. And we were having breakfast at Steak and Shake, and you showed me kind of the V, and you said, "Okay, it's time to start getting back up to the top." And I still remember that to this day.
Yeah, thank you.
The one thing.
Wow, now you see it, huh? Steve's got the power.
The one thing that I seem to keep learning over and over again, and I think I'm finally getting a clue, is that things are almost never as bad as they seem.
Wow, that's profound. Yeah.
Well, just kind of build on that, Bill, something that I realized in life is it has a way of just evening itself out. So think about, for all the negatives, there's an equal and opposite positive. And if you keep that frame of reference in mind, that you're all going to be challenged, but there's a positive light too that will come from all the negatives. So life balances itself out. For every negative, there's an equal and opposite positive.
Thank you.
I think this kind of speaks to somebody who has a traumatic event, like a death. But sometimes there's traumatic events that don't stop. And that gets really difficult. And I had that situation when I had a child. I mean, my dad had a heart attack. My father-in-law had a heart attack. I then got sick and couldn't breathe and was in the hospital. My kid got that. Because my kid got that, we found out he had cancer. Sounds absolutely awful, and we got through that. And now I can be thankful for my breathing problems because my kid wouldn't be around if none of this happened, and everyone lived through it, and everyone's fine. And the one thing that I learned is I had nothing really, my events weren't stopping. They kept coming at us. And every night we had to go through what we were thankful for. And that's all we had to hold on to was what we were thankful for. And gratitude got us through it. So I think
Yeah.
practicing gratitude is a huge thing to add.
Yes. Thank you for sharing that.
I'm going to go ahead and share because my heart rate's going really fast, and that always tells me I have to share whether I want to or not.
Good mechanism.
So I am going to share. But my husband has had 2 death rehearsals with death, which I don't know if anybody's had that, but it's life-changing. Makes your whole life look different and how you look at life. And I would not be here right now, and I'm way out of my comfort zone. But I would not be here if I made a choice to either be a victim of what's happening, and it's ongoing, it's not over, or a victim or a victor. And I've chosen to be a victor, and I think that's kind of what, that take charge, and just keep taking the next step and what is next. So,
Yeah. Congratulations. Yeah.
In 1997, I was told I had stage 3 ovarian cancer, and to me, the first thing out of my mouth was, "Well, it's not 10." And he goes, "Well, it's out of 4." And I said, "Oh, well, it's not 4. It's not 4." And so for me, what I feel like that certainly changed my life, but it's also always about coming from being grateful. And I mean, there were a series of weird things that happened that had me in the hospital to have the surgery to find out that because we didn't know I had cancer. I went in for something else and they found it. So, it's for me, it's like, how can I look for the good? How can I look for, it wasn't 10 or 4, So anyway, looking for what's good.
Mine came from a head-on collision where I spent 3 years in physical therapy, and just grateful I could walk and still walk today. But mine came more from forgiveness for the young lady that hit us. And it was a roller coaster, thankful to be alive, not so thankful, thankful to be alive, and, forgiveness and not forgiving. But mine came from forgiveness.
Well, this isn't nearly as profound or serious as the ones I just got done hearing, which is very emotional. Thank you for sharing that stuff. But I did something with my girls when they were growing up that I think relates to this. When they would do something that would sort of be in the spiral, bad behavior, bad outcomes, bad everything, I would sort of coach them and get them to the point where they first were apologizing for it. So they would say, "I'm sorry, Daddy." I say, "Well, I really appreciate your apology, but what are we going to do to make sure it doesn't happen again?"
Yeah.
So that we can turn this negative situation
Yeah.
into a conversation about how do we move forward in a positive way.
Yeah. Simple solution. Yeah.
For me, there's been lots of things that have gone through my life, but what I've learned over that is to trust the process. Is that, this life that's set before you, it's already set, right? We just don't. It's a choice to decide what we're going to do with it. And I think whether that paralyzes you or you go forward, but it always comes back to trusting the process, whether that's an entrepreneur, whether that's your life relationships, there's a process and something to be learned from that, and be vulnerable to that. And don't be afraid of that, because as soon as you turn into fear, it will paralyze you.
So true.
And thanks to everyone, and thank you, Bill, for this concept. This brings to mind a quote from Charles Darwin, which he's often misquoted as the strongest survive, or the strongest of a species survive. But the actual quote is, "It's not the strongest or the most intelligent that survive, but those that are more adaptive to change and ability to rise above the circumstance immediately before you." So that's really what I'm hearing echoed time and time again here. These challenges present themselves. It's our adaptability, resilience, and willingness and functionality and change.
Yeah. Thank you for that summary, Dan. So I'm going to wrap it up. This is incredible. When my son got killed, I don't know if you're familiar with losing a child, and I hope none of you experienced that, but it is either going to kill you or you're going to rise above it. And this tool has allowed me to rise above that. And I do this in his honor. So my point to you is this. I think you can prepare for this. I mean, excuse me for this expression, but shit happens. Right? I mean, it's going to happen to you, but you don't need to wait until it happens. You can develop your own little tools every day on how you cope with things and how you deal. So why not fashion that, your own system, whatever that is? You heard a lot of good ideas. Why not fashion it now while you're dealing with small things? Because then when the big things come along, you will already have had a way of coping with this rather than getting blown away by it. So, be prepared and think about it now. So, ultimately, at the end of the day, what matters is just how we respond. And Dan, to your point, I mean, things are going to happen to us, but the key is how do we respond to it? And we're not alone. We should seek other people's help in that, share openly the way we did here today. But we don't have to. I don't run from suffering. To me, suffering is something that's part of life. And what I've learned is how I cope with suffering is really the key. And that's a choice that I make every day. So thanks for sharing today, and good luck with this thing. So, yeah. Do we have a minute? Oh, okay. Thank you. I wasn't sure if I was out of time. Thank you. Yeah. Andy.
Just make a comment here. What I've observed is that pain happens, suffering's optional.
Over here.
Well, first I want to thank everyone and Will for bringing me here, because I'm like, wow, I was running late and things were crazy, and I got pretty much every question I needed answered between all of you speakers. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
One of the things that I wanted to ask, because it was something that I'm still trying to manage, through this process of a bad event happening, and I've noticed that there tends to be people that rise, to hold space for you, and there tends to be, you start to learn who the reporters are. And, those are the people who can't wait to tell your exciting story so that it's some level of excitement for them. There's people who try to minimize what you're going through. How do you lovingly isolate and put up boundaries so that you can focus, through this healing, basically?
You mean there are people who will try to distract you from where you're trying to go?
Yeah, basically, that's when you'll find people, I think what people say a lot now is, if they're not giving to your life, cut them out of your life. Well, that doesn't really always work, and they're going through their own level of trauma, but sometimes what they're going through is more damaging to both of you. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So yeah. That's what I was like, how do you protect the boundaries of the people that, like I said, they try to minimize, or they try to report your trauma so that it's exciting for them? It really does happen when you have bad situations like that.
So because of an experience that I had earlier in my life, I pay very close attention to what people say and what they do. I mean, there are a lot of people who say things, oh, I love you, this and that, but then they act like they don't love you. And so I just don't associate with people who don't act. If I find that kind of incongruency between what people say and what they do, I run from them. I mean, that's the only solution I found. I don't want to be around people who say one thing and do another. I find that to be very hard on me. So that's the way I do it. Thanks, you guys. Great life.